Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is the online presentation of my panel to be presented at MFF 2024 as of this recording. It's called Self-Expression and Authenticity in the Furry Fandom. I want to thank you guys for coming here and listening. This is a panel that I hope will be helpful to some people, because I know that this sort of message was quite helpful to me. So the first question is why? I want to talk about, the whys of this, why I think it's important, who I am, why I am here presenting this panel, and why I think it's important. First, a little introduction to me. My name is Loki. Most people call me Loki, but my full name is Lokiri. I am a trans woman who's been in the fandom for a few years now. I ultimately found it rather late, but once I found it, I made a ton of progress in terms of understanding who I am and how I can do better by myself. So I grew up in a situation which, like, on the surface was privileged. I thought I was white. Well, sorry, I am white. I thought I was male and cis and neurotypical. I apparently lump white into those things, but anyway, I thought I was all these normal things, and I was kind of scared to not be them because I was just afraid of rejection from people. I was really afraid of disappointing people because of some early history with parents and family. And so I largely lived a life between the lines for about, until I was about 30. And then I found the furry fandom and realized I am not cis, I am not straight, and I'm not neurotypical. I'm still white, though. Sorry. Could not make that joke. But the point is, I really was very, very deep in my shell early in my life. And I think finding the fandom, I always describe it as saving my life. Not because my life was in danger before or that I was going to hurt myself, but because I really wasn't living it. I was largely just surviving. Like, I was really, really avoiding people because people meant stress. People meant I have to conform. I have to do what they want. I have to, like, I was a really, really bad people pleaser. Just someone who never showed up authentically for anyone and just was constantly, like, trying to be what I thought other people wanted whenever I was around them, and generally was avoiding people as a result. And boy, did the furry fandom change a lot of that. Just seeing you guys and, how queer and yourselves you are, you really inspired me to look at myself and try to find a little acceptance there and change my life in a way that means that I'm actually living it. And I'm really, really grateful to you guys for that. I think that being your authentic self can also be a light for other people. And so it's just, I'm not a therapist. I'm not, like, any more qualified to talk about this than anybody else necessarily. Other than the fact that I've, looked at several resources about self-improvement. I'm someone who's passionate about it and thinks it's important and wants to talk about it with you today. And that sort of leads us to the second why, which is why here. Technically, I am recording this at home, not at a furry convention, but the panel itself will be at a furry convention, so that's why the slide says that. Why talk about this here? And, like, I want to be respectful of all of your con time, because I know con time is valuable. But why talk about difficult subjects like this at a furry convention? And I think here's a very good place to talk about this, because a lot of us have wounding, and I think we have the power to help each other in a way that is often underutilized. I think with the furry fandom having a disproportionate amount of marginalized identities, We are in a unique position to understand how the world hurts people like us and help each other, be found family for each other, um, create a community which exists in contrast to the rest of the world, which otherwise tends to treat us really poorly. Um, and I've seen a lot of friends really like find this through the furry fandom, and so I want to advocate for it here. I think we have the capability to do it, and I want to see more of it. So, um, I want to start with some cute little "Have you ever" questions, because just as a way to underscore like the importance of this subject. When I do the speech itself, I'll be asking people to raise their hands, but in chat, feel free to just like put a 1 in chat if you've ever, as I go through these. Have you ever felt like you don't really know what you want in a specific situation, or worse, broadly in life? Have you ever said yes to something that you didn't really want to do and then kind of resented it later? Have you ever told someone that their actions hurt you? Have you ever been too nervous to tell someone you like them? Have you ever lost a relationship, dating or otherwise, for reasons that the other person never really shared with you? These might seem unrelated, but I think these are all things that are that authenticity can help with, and hopefully that will become apparent as the speech goes on. But for now, we're going to continue. And sort of define what it means to be authentic. And really, it's very simple. Authenticity is simply externalizing to others what you feel inside. It is connection between your inside experience and your outside expression. It's letting others around you know how you really actually feel, regardless of how you think they'll react to it, and casting off all masks, including neurodivergent masking, etc. And if you're here, it's probably because you want to do better at this. And I think it's probably this is probably the biggest example of easier said than done. There's so many obstacles to being authentic. Anxiety, this notion of there's something wrong with me fundamentally as a person, fear of some sort of repercussions, rejection, social ostracization, etc. Fear of hurting others, being annoying, or otherwise being construed in a negative way. Fear of being vulnerable, letting others know that they're hurting you, and fear that they will use that to keep hurting you. Toxic shame and guilt, shame-bound personalities, etc. And there's so many more. And as I'm about to get into, the world we live in often reinforces these obstacles, unfortunately. And why is it important, in my opinion? And there's sort of 2 parts to this. Being authentic with yourself is being in touch with your own emotions, listening to what your body is telling you and caring about it, and using it to guide your experience. Knowing what you want, permitting yourself to want it, and seek it, and then understanding your fears in a way that enables you to work towards beating them, not letting them control your life, but at a pace that's comfortable. And then the second part is being authentic with others. Again, expressing your emotions to other people. Being able to voice what you genuinely want to other people, which enables people who do genuinely want you to help you to do so. Attracting people who like the real you rather than a mask that you think they will like. And I think also being better equipped to navigate interpersonal conflict. I think there'll be plenty of examples that I think underscore why authenticity can be important in conflict. I know I've had a few conflicts where if I went back in time, I wish I had been more authentic in them. I wish I had had the courage to express what I needed to express. So the first section of the speech is going to talk about the world we live in, and how I think it's really messed up, personally. and how it encouraged us to not be authentic and sort of validate the difficulties that we have being authentic now, because, you know, to provide some context. I think overbearingly, to simplify a complicated situation, the society we live in views control as a measure of your worth. And it's control of resources, most notably this thing we collectively decided to make up called money. The situation, having access to what you need to stay safe, and, you know, etc., and other people, being desirable to other people or otherwise able to influence their actions more, such as popularity and other, you know, measures of that. And society's viewpoint is basically the more control you have, the more valuable you are as a person. And this value judgment is incredibly pervasive. Once you like understand it, at least once I've understood it, I've seen it everywhere. It's very sort of insidious that way, because it gets in your own mindset, and it, you know, because it's so pervasive, it becomes a part of your mindset. And I think sort of that judgment of like you're only valuable if is a huge obstacle to authenticity. So I'm trying to just point it out, and I'm gonna give some examples, several examples. First of all, I mean, this should be obvious. People who control a lot of stuff, have a lot of money, you know, are in charge of large organizations, whatever else, get the biggest megaphones in society. I don't think this warrants too much explanation. Especially in this capitalistic society, especially in America, like the people who you hear on the news are people who are leaders. You know, they're people who are given a lot of societal power. In media, characters depicted are often people that have some kind of unique control that affects a bunch of people and the plot, whether that's like super strength or like some information that nobody has. And people who don't have control of the plot are usually passive set pieces. They're, you know, people to, you know, save, who are worth saving but not important. You know, heroes are also often protecting a status quo. And sometimes they're even against people who are marginalized and justifiably angry at the status quo. So this sort of all represents a value judgment of, again, that sort of people who are more in control are more valuable. School is one big giant value judgment. It takes something that's supposed to be, you know, learning and actually enabling kids, and turns it into this standardized test grade-based thing where, you know, you're assigned a value and you're told how valuable you're going to be in life or not. And I personally think that sucks. I don't know about you guys. You know, you're told that how well you do in school will determine the type of job you get, how much you deserve. And there's other pecking orders based on sports performance, you know, popularity, number of friends, etc. Like everything becomes how valuable you are. Relationship lingo, especially monogamous, you know, amatonormative relationship lingo, is full of value judgments. The phrase being good enough for your SO or doing good enough for them is, you know, very much something that is worded in a way that it's about your value rather than what you're actually doing. There's language about being in or out of your league. You know, if dating someone who has more social capital than you or whatever, or else in your league. And all of these are based on control. Being able to control your partner's behavior because, you know, they're dependent on you or you're important to them. Being able to control someone else to date you because you're the best option that's, quote, in their league. There's a lot of language which reinforces this sort of relationships are a gauge of value. This is kind of a random one, but keeping your living place clean and other sort of normie stuff. I've seen a lot of value judgments attached to that. I've literally seen like self-help therapy videos where someone is making the case that like you not keeping your living place clean is like devaluing yourself, and it's just like there's a lot of value that gets tied into this like notion of being prim and proper and keeping your place clean and whatever else. Being able to survive in late stage capitalism at all, being employable, retaining employment, inheriting wealth, perhaps the most bizarre value judgment out there, because inheriting wealth is strictly luck. There's nothing you can do about it. But yeah, people who inherit wealth are considered more valuable than people who don't. Marginalization in general. If you aren't normal, for whatever definition of normal is, society often tells you to suck it up. It tells you, like, you need to change to fit what's normal, or else you aren't worth accommodating. For example, people who are disabled, people who say can't walk and are in a wheelchair. Things are becoming more and more wheelchair accessible these days, but anywhere that doesn't have a wheelchair accessible entrance is basically saying suck it up. And if you can't walk, you can't walk. It's a very, it's maybe not an explicit value judgment that anybody will tell you, but it is an implicit value judgment. Refusing to acknowledge and accept diversity if it's inconvenient, and diversity often is inconvenient to the status quo. Bullying, putting people down, whether that's online or offline. This sort of internalized value judgment causes some people who are insecure to internalize the message that if they put other people down, they become more valuable because their value is relative to other people. And so if they find people that they can hurt who won't punch back, they'll feel better about themselves. And that's an unfortunate reality. Broadly, any us versus them mentality is also a value judgment. Us versus them often involves dehumanizing the other side and saying that there's something, quote, wrong with them and there's something, quote, right with you. And dehumanization is the ultimate value judgment. It's saying that your life doesn't matter. If you die or whatever else, then that's not much of a problem. And so, like, the point of mentioning all these examples is to kind of explain, give context for why authenticity is difficult. I think it's no wonder that we are so inclined to think so little of ourselves in a world that's constantly telling us we're only good enough if, or otherwise we're not good enough. And this causes a lot of wounding, which has pervasive, effects. The biggest one, again, is like the obstacle to authenticity: disconnection between your inside and your inside emotional experience and what you express. Cutting off from expressing or even acknowledging the parts of your emotional experience because in formative years they were unsafe to express. Lack of safety can mean causing you physical or mental harm, causing people to hurt you physically or mentally, or causing a caregiver to withdraw from connection and not meet your needs as well. Sometimes it manifests as basically a blindness to the emotion that was unsafe to express. As an example, I was really blind to anger in me for a while because anger was one of the most stigmatized emotions in my house growing up. And so I learned it's not safe to express. And so I really struggled to even know when I was angry for a while. It can also manifest as extreme anxiety surrounding making those emotions known to others, also true in my situation. But everything has to be, every feeling has to be processed somehow. And if it's not processed consciously, it will surface unconsciously. And usually this is not the best outcome. For example, if you don't consciously acknowledge anger, it might come out later as passive aggressiveness. For example. Another wound is existential anxiety about the need to continually prove that you are valuable and worth loving and accommodating. We live in a capitalistic society, which basically tells us, no, you're not worth having any of your basic needs met, including housing and food. if you don't do something for someone else. And there's also pervasive stigma against like being emotionally self-sufficient. You're not supposed to brag about yourself. You're supposed to rely on others for validation through accomplishments or relationships or whatever other vehicle that takes. Toxic shame and shame-bound personalities are a huge one. I feel like I see a lot of people who have that, and I feel like I can recognize it because I had it for the longest time. There's a productive form of shame which attaches itself to behavior. It basically is like, okay, this behavior was not in line with my values or else caused someone harm and I feel shame about it. That's the productive version of shame. But if it goes too far, it attaches to your identity. I am a bad person and should be ashamed of who I am. And that's where it gets to be a huge, huge burden to bear. I know I've borne it myself. Value judgment-based thinking, just broadly, towards yourself, only thinking that you're a good person or worth loving if you filter your experience through what is acceptable. And then towards other people, if someone else breaks the rules that you've internalized, then you're not likely to like them. You're likely to think that they're a pretty bad person. And broadly, communicating in ways that try to control others rather than relating to them. More on that later. More on that now, that is. So what does it mean to communicate to control? It sounds a lot worse than it is. It's not necessarily abuse in and of itself. Communicating to control is, communicating to keep yourself safe. It's any communication which strategically tries to influence how someone else sees you. And that can take many, many forms. For example, trying to effect a favorable first impression, job interviews, dressing up, hiding large swaths of your personality for job interviews. I know I do that. Neurodivergent masking is a form of communicating to control. Hiding aspects of your lived experience you are ashamed of from others. People-pleasing and fawn responses. I am super guilty of these things. I'm still working on them. Not telling someone how you really actually feel. It's often a protective thing where you don't think you can handle the rejection and you're worried about that having an adverse effect on your relationship with the person. So not confessing to someone you have a crush on, not telling them how you feel about them. It is a way of controlling the situation because it doesn't give them a chance to reject you. The other way to control the situation is not telling someone their actions hurt you. I'm super, super guilty of this one. I have a tendency to, if someone hurts me and I'm not close enough to them, I just won't tell them, and I'll withdraw from their company and they won't know why, and I'm still working on that. We're all working on things. Why do we do it? To prove we're valuable, because we've internalized that we're valuable only if we have control. The aforementioned social value placed on control also kind of stigmatizes anyone who's not in control, and this is why people who have less control in society are often stigmatized. People of color, people who are disabled, people who are poor. It leads to a lot of dehumanizing mindsets, which really treat these people very poorly. And the second reason is to ensure that our needs are met. And these are things that we really want or need. And often it's, the more desperate you are, the more you will tend to communicate to control. It's born of a perceived scarcity of a resource that is needed to survive. And the reason I say perceived scarcity is, I guess, sometimes it's not always a perceived scarcity. Capitalism creates scarcity where otherwise none would be. But sometimes the scarcity is perceived as well. For example, I know early on in my journey, I didn't think I was lovable. And so anybody who allowed me to think differently was viewed as a very, very prized resource, like a very scarce resource. So that's what I mean by perceived scarcity. It's based on like how you view your access to the resource. Earlier on, we were dependent on caretakers like parents to meet our needs, so acting in ways that induced them to provide us with more care helped us survive. So communicating to control was very much a survival strategy early on. And unfortunately, as I alluded to earlier, late-stage capitalism means we often never feel free from this perceived scarcity. We will always need food, shelter, medical attention, social safety, and the painful reality is that many of us, especially here in the fandom, who are marginalized, disabled, or otherwise don't fit well into normie society, we don't have it consistently, or if we have it at all. And I hate that for us. I believe many mental health issues marginalized people have are really not inherent to our condition, but rather hinge on this, just being excluded, being on the outside, being marginalized, being relegated to the margins. The system, to varying degrees and in various ways, does not work for us. It places disproportionate demands on us to conform and to fit ourselves into it, and in order to do that, we have to be something we're not. And I hate that for us, again. And I don't want to say communicating to control is bad. Sometimes it's necessary, in fact. Masking to secure access to a needed resource would be an example. Showing up to a job interview and not being forthright about all your, all the things that might be stigmatized about you. Hiding a non-conforming aspect of yourself in unsafe company, for example, being in the closet, not transitioning when like your family is not making that safe for you, as an example. Trying to mitigate or control a person's emotions if those emotions present a danger to you or to them. For example, someone who has an explosive temper and is inclined to lash out. There's reasons to communicate strategically, and it's mainly to protect you and to keep you safe. However, communicating to control doesn't invite authentic connection. So the key, and I think the skill to develop more than anything, is to know as well as you can how to communicate to relate in situations where it is safe. There is no shame in not being able to do that in a situation which is not safe. In fact, that's just how it is. So now that we've gone over the society we live in, what do we do about it? What can we do about it? And I think there's largely three components to this. We may not be able to change the whole world. I mean, gestures broadly at our political system. But I think that changing our spaces does a lot of good. Even if it's just like our friend groups, like by being ourselves authentically, we can touch the lives of other people, and we can do a lot more good than we think. And I think there's broadly 3 steps to doing better, both individually and collectively. On the individual level, the first step is to be more in touch with our own true feelings, if there's any that we're blind to. And then the second step is practicing expressing that to other people. And the third kind of, not really the third step. The steps 2 and 3 in this are a little interrelated, and I'm kind of presenting them in an arbitrary order. But the first aspect is learning to express your feelings to other people, and the third aspect is creating space in which it's easier for other people to be authentic with you. So we're going to go over the first one first, reconnecting with your own feelings. If authenticity is congruence between the inside and the outside, the most important step is to learn to listen to what's going on inside. And again, this is easier said than done, especially if emotions have been relegated to like suppressed territory. It's important, I think, to realize that you don't choose to feel the feelings you do, only how you respond to them. In that sense, there is no feeling that is inherently shameful. There is actions that might be better or worse aligned with your values and goals and might be better or worse serve you at meeting them, but your feelings are a signal from your body. They're your body talking back to your brain. And your brain really is trying to control things, especially because that's the society we live in. But your body is like the only your feelings are your body talking back and being like, I don't like this, or I like this, or this is how I feel about this. Feelings express mostly wants and boundaries, which are the two most important aspects of who you really are. Not who you've convinced yourself you are, but who you really are. So one of the big goals is to do your best to impartially observe your feelings, even the ones you're ashamed of. In fact, especially the ones you're ashamed of, because those are the ones you're most likely to be blind to. And impartially is the key word here. If you're observing them in a judgmental way, like, I shouldn't do that, this is stupid, then that is basically berating yourself. It's basically berating your body, it's berating your needs, and trying your best not to do that will probably help. I know it helped me a lot. If you're like me and you have a complicated yarn of trauma where like your feelings cascade and cause other feelings, observe those too. Try your best to observe those impartially too. For example, whenever I felt jealous, I felt shameful about a result of that jealousy before. And so, like, just whatever happens, observing it and sitting with it, excuse me. Any way of recording feelings in the moment they occur can help you if you tend to forget them later. Like journaling, texting, like even little notes to yourself, texting yourself, especially if you tend to forget them otherwise. Either way, do your best to to make space and time to sit with your emotions, even the ones that are uncomfortable. It's very easy to seek distractions to escape them. And don't ever take on anything you can't handle. But if you ever have the spoons to sit with your emotions, it's a good thing. Again, try not to always seek distractions or numbing when you're feeling something uncomfortable. Always stick to what you can handle and take things at your pace. There's no shame in needing to disassociate and escape from time to time. I know I still do. The important thing is spending a manageable amount of time listening to your feelings rather than running away. And manageable is whatever that means for you right now. Shaming yourself for not, quote, making enough progress is another trap, which I advise trying to avoid. Noticing particularly differences between how you think you should feel and how you actually do. Again, no feeling is inherently shameful to have. And another thing to keep in mind is you're probably not the only person who feels that way. I know early on I tended very much to be like, I'm the only one who feels this way, nobody will understand, and I continually got surprised by people who did validate my feelings and did respect my feelings, and I think that's really important. Even feelings that seem in a moment to be pulling you towards unwanted behaviors aren't inherently bad. It's just that sometimes sort of the mechanism that enables that is that that's what you think the only way to process that feeling is. And taking the time to process that feeling can reveal different ways of processing that feeling and different ways of finding an outlet for it, and often can repurpose them for your good instead. I guess as an example, I used to have a lot of repressed anger, as I've mentioned before. And obviously, I think it's easy to think of unwanted behaviors that anger would pull you towards that are, that are not good. But after taking the time to process my anger, it sort of lost its fangs. And it sort of became something that helped me actually like know my boundaries and communicate my boundaries to other people instead. And bringing it out into the light made it not a monster anymore. It made it something that's a part of me and is something that I listen to now. Specific thing about trauma responses. Trauma responses are probably one of the hardest things to deal with. And when I say a trauma response, I mean like something which causes you to flash back to an emotional state where you were traumatized. For example, if you've had a bad experience in a dating relationship with someone who had a certain interest, then another person, completely different person having the same interest, might elicit a trauma response where like you're comparing. And trauma responses are important too. Trauma tells you how you've been hurt before, which often tells you ways that you can heal from it and grow from it. Change is often easier if you know where you are right now and have accepted where you are right now, even though you might want to work to change. I highly recommend finding people that you feel comfortable being honest with, even about trauma responses. Remember that trauma responses often cause an overreaction because an event is making you recall strong negative feelings from something that happened in the past. Being clear with a person you're talking about that they didn't inflict that wound is a good communication strategy. For example, like if someone caused a trauma response in you, then tell them, hey, I wanted to let you know that this caused a trauma response in me. It's not your fault. You didn't inflict that trauma on me. You basically are brushing up against a wound. And I want to let you know about that, but I don't blame you for it. So like being clear about trauma responses and what they are and how they work can be helpful in making sure that you're communicating things in ways that are likely to be interpreted as a genuine attempt to relate rather than something accusatory. And then I want to talk about shadow work, which is kind of related to this. So if you're completely blind to a feeling or a trauma response or any other aspect of your internal experience, shadow work is often the most helpful way to find it. It's basically looking at subconscious feelings and trying to bring them back to the surface, coax them back to the surface and figure out what they mean. So it typically involves paying attention to habits, especially ones that you really don't like that you do, like, junk food addictions or video game addictions or any other like thing where you feel like you're not, the way you're using your time is not in line with how you want to use your time. Triggers, things which cause trauma responses or otherwise put you in a strong negative emotional state or make you overreact. Or projecting onto other people, misinterpreting someone else's behavior based on your own worldview, which often reveals your insecurities or other things that you've subconsciously internalized. And I don't know how to describe, like the best way to describe shadow work, I think, is just to look at a bunch of examples of shadow work that I've done personally in the past. I very much had a subconscious compulsion to seek frequent escapes from my emotional experience, like VR, video games, anything else that's highly immersive and distracting. And what I found is that this told me that my ambient level of stress in life was really, really freaking high. And I needed something to escape that. And just like, I needed to narrow my world down to something that was simple and didn't overwhelm me. And it basically helped me learn about my autism. It helped me learn how I was maintaining a whole bunch of masks that I wasn't even aware about growing up, and how much stress those put on me just constantly because I was masking really hard on everybody. So that's kind of what I learned from that compulsion, and I think learning from it has helped to, lower its power on me. Jealousy towards people who have vibrant social lives tells me I don't have enough social outlets, which is always an ongoing issue. I'm sensory processing sensitive, so big rooms with a whole bunch of people talking all at once are very difficult for me. So I have fewer social outlets than other people because most social outlets are that. But either way, knowing, bringing this to my conscious awareness helps me know my priorities better and has helped me restructure my life in certain ways. For example, I moved halfway across the country recently, so that I would have more social opportunities than I did or I did before. But work is always ongoing. Projecting worthlessness and shame onto lonely people, particularly masculine presenting people. This is very much a reflection of the fact that I'm a trans girl. It's a reflection of my early trauma of trying to fit myself into that masculine, like category and really failing at it, and how much I like hurt myself trying to fit into that. It's a reflection of early trauma before transitioning and how negatively I viewed myself at that point. And sitting with that really actually helped me in a bunch of ways because it helped me love my past self more. For a while, I was able to love my present self, but I wasn't able to love my past self. And because of that, I was able to be more loving and accepting to people who were in the position I was, which was really important to me. Many difficult feelings concerning relationships and sex, still ongoing with this. This concerns past relationship trauma, a pervasive sense of misogyny, and connections with many of my core traumas. And this is very much still ongoing. So, second part is, now that you're in, if you're in touch with your own feelings, expressing your feelings to other people, and sort of talking about that. So first we're going to talk about communicating to relate. So remember how we talked about communicating to control earlier? There's a second reason that people communicate, and it's to communicate to relate. And this can be very scary. It's basically sharing how you really feel when you feel it. It's maintaining congruence between your inside experience and how you show up in the world. It's, if you're sad, you're not shy to express that you're sad. If you're angry, you're not shy to express that you're angry, etc. And this necessarily involves a relinquishment of the aims of communicating to control, because you can't control how people respond to your true feelings. They're your true feelings. They're the unfiltered signal from your body. And who knows how people will respond to them? If you tell someone you like them, who knows what they'll say? They might be interested or they might reject you. So that's really the core, really a very core definition of what communicating to relate is, relinquishing that control and telling them how it really is. And again, especially those who aren't used to receiving understanding and compassion from others, hi, that's me, this can be very, very scary. If this is something you've struggled with in the past, don't expect it to be easy at first. It's simple to explain, it's not simple to do. In my case in particular, this has taken years and it's continuing to take time. I had this, I describe it as like a yarn ball of trauma, of interrelated trauma, often comorbid with each other, that presented a whole bunch of obstacles related to me feeling safe expressing myself. Sitting with feelings, especially your fears, really helps with this. Understanding where you are is the first step to changing the way that you want to, because again, fear is usually what's stopping you from communicating to other people. It's fear of being rejected. It's fear of, oh, they're not going to like me if I show them this part of me. And sitting with those fears and really understanding where they came from is a good way to try and break this down. But stick to what you can handle. You don't need to take every opportunity to confront your fears, but try to spot opportunities that feel more manageable to you. And if spoons allow you in that moment, take the shot. For example, you could even go up to somebody and be like, hey, can I practice telling you this? This is silly. Don't take it seriously. Do whatever you need to make it feel safe for you at first. And try your best to respect that, even if it seems to involve bending over backwards or something, quote, unreasonable. But for example, you can stick to closer friends who you've talked to more. I'm very much in that stage with some things right now where I'm very much struggling to be genuine with people I don't know as well. Practicing exposure to rejection by letting yourself receive it in situations where you know it will not matter. Like asking a stranger on the street who you will never see again for something that they'll probably reject. That's a little scary. I've never done that one before, but it's worked for some people, so I wanted to mention it. And I wanted to talk about strategies which can help you talk in specific, transparent ways. Because ultimately, some things are difficult to express because other people tend to react to them in certain ways which are not helpful. For example, especially negative things. Like if you're telling someone their behavior has hurt you, it's easy for them to take that the wrong way. And I know that one from experience. So trying to sort of mold what you say into something that's going to sound less aggressive. Again, this is a bit of a talking about this is a little bit ironic because this is a little bit strategic, right? But I also think that it is genuine. So I think it's worth discussing. Let's say someone has told you that your actions hurt them. How would it feel to hear them say these options to you? Option 1, what's wrong with you? Why would you do that? That's option 1. Option 2 is, I'm really upset that you would hurt me like this. Please be more thoughtful next time. Option 3, say nothing. Basically, video game, if you've played like a Bethesda or BioWare game, person disliked that in the corner of your screen. Or option 4, hey, I just wanted to let you know that when you did this specific thing, it made me feel hurt, and I wanted you to know that. I don't think you intended to hurt me, but I wanted to ask what you did intend by it. The one that you like hearing the most of the above is probably the one that's best to say when communicating with others. And this is a bit of a, I kind of made this example obvious deliberately, but option 4 is obviously what I would recommend most. Because it is specific about what they did. It's specific about letting them know that you're interpreting it based on trauma, and asking them to basically correct the record and be like, how did you really mean this? And that's how you clear up misunderstandings. Because if you don't do this and you keep going assuming that they intended to hurt you, then that's a difference between you. It creates a mismatch between you. It creates a miscommunication, and miscommunications are often the source of conflict. So I think adopting a strategy like this and adapting it to various circumstances can be very helpful. I think finding people to talk with about your genuine feelings is really important. I know it has been really important for me. It's much easier to tackle feelings and bring them up to the light when there are more people to share them with. Much of my growth was only possible because I had people who loved me enough to listen to my real feelings and honor them, and some of them are watching right now. So if you're there, thank you. I want to thank you for that. I do want to caution though, avoid airing feelings in public spaces like social media, Twitch chats, wherever else. The rules against trauma dumping in public spaces aren't there because your trauma is this awful thing that nobody should ever hear about. They're there because you can't properly get consent from everyone in a public space. It's just not feasible. Airing trauma to somebody, they do have to have enough spoons to deal with it. They do have to have enough of a personal connection to you to feel invested enough. And so it is something that you should acquire consent first for. But that doesn't mean it's, again, this taboo thing that you should never share with anybody. You're generally better served finding people you trust and doing your best to work up the courage to ask them for help in private. It often starts with one person or a small handful of people who you are closest to. And one possible strategy is you can sort of approach them with a model of radical honesty. You can tell them, hey, I'm trying to do this thing called radical honesty, where I tell you how I really feel. And that can be difficult. Don't ask if you don't feel like you can't do it, but they can reject you, they can say no, but I think more people will say yes than you think. I know that was very much true for me early on. You should only take a leap of faith like this when you feel you're ready. But the first steps are sometimes going to have to feel like leaps of faith. Sometimes the only way to cure a notion that if you express yourself truly, people will hate you is finding a situation where that was proven wrong by someone, by the right person in the right place, where you did express yourself to someone and it was okay. Exposure therapy is, there's a time and a place for it, but it definitely helps when it comes to some fears. Many beliefs that inhibit your self-acceptance and self-expression are effectively self-reinforcing. They're only true because you believe they are. For example, if you tell yourself that you can't handle rejection, that becomes true. The fact of the matter is, rejection is a necessary risk when it comes to asking people to do things, and you probably can handle it. It's just, at previous times in your life, it's felt really ostracizing and really awful, and yeah, that can take time to deconstruct, but ultimately, don't take the Band-Aid off if the wound is still bleeding. Be respectful of what your limits are, but recognize that sometimes you do have to take Band-Aids off, and sometimes that will hurt. And speaking of sometimes that will hurt, the flip side of finding the right people is that sometimes you have to escape from the wrong people. I would imagine there's people in the audience here who have had to put distance between themselves, for example, and their nuclear families, because there's parts of that, that haven't really, there's parts of that have been hostile to genuine expression. It doesn't have to be a value judgment. You don't have to say the people I'm distancing myself from are awful and I hate them. It's okay to say either to yourself or or if you're feeling brave, to them, you're not a bad person, but the type of relationship we have right now isn't what I want. And, obviously you can only have that conversation with some people. Unfortunately, sometimes situations are toxic enough that you just do have to put up walls, cut off family, etc. And, do that if you have to. But things don't have to be all or nothing. You can consider increasing the distance without completely cutting someone off. It does not have to be all or nothing. The wound is more likely to remain open. The specific wound that a person is causing you is more likely to remain open and bleeding in their presence. I know I had a period of time recently where I was staying with my parents, and it felt like I was just sliding back on all the things that I was working on. And it's because at the end of the day, they are the source of a few things that I, deal with. So independence from them is a need of mine. It doesn't have to be all or nothing, but sometimes that's best. I have known friends who they simply have abusive family members who feel entitled to something that they are not entitled to. You're never entitled to something from someone else, even if you are related to them. And sometimes it is best to go no contact. And you have my support if that's something you have to do, and it can be hard, but sometimes it's necessary. But either way, try to let yourself find the right distance, no matter what that is, that you're most comfortable with for each person in your life. And unfortunately, sometimes showing up authentically will cost you relationships. But remember, people who loved a masked version of you never really got the chance to know a real version of you. And if you had to mask to be accepted by them, then they didn't really love the real you. By being your truer self, you're giving them a chance to do that, to love the real you. And if they don't take that, then it can hurt. It will hurt. But it's important information about them. I think it again helps you judge distance. Like, what is the optimal distance from this person? My personal anecdote is transitioning. It was really scary to transition to a woman, which I did a few years ago, and that very much was being a truer self of of myself. And it made some situations a lot less comfortable, because some people were not okay with that. And but there is a silver lining, which the next bullet point shows. It also made it much more clearer to me who loved me, like really loved me, and wanted to know the authentic me, and I think that really helped, because this does have a silver lining. If you show up authentically long enough, you will attract people who like the authentic version of you, and it will be more obvious who those people are, because you'll have a closer connection with them. These relationships are likely to be easier to maintain because you don't have to mask. They're likely to be deeper and more connected and more rewarding. I think that should be obvious. So then finally, the third aspect is trying to help other people be more authentic, creating a space around you where authenticity is rewarded, and it's appreciated, and it's given and received. We can do more good than we think we can for each other, as I've alluded to. I think the furry fandom is in a unique position. We have so many marginalized people who understand why mainstream society is so messed up. And I think that empowers us to do better. It empowers us within our spaces to create a more collectivist, a more genuine, a more vibrant society where people are being themselves more readily. Therapy is often the first thing that we talk about in any sort of mental health journey, and I'm not bashing it. The right therapist is amazing, and there are absolutely good ones out there, but there's also bad ones out there. And overall, they will often approach problems from a normative standpoint. They will use a lot of shoulds. They'll approach it from a sort of clinical perspective, where you have a problem and they're there to fix it. A lot of therapist training is focused on pathologizing problems and fixing them. It's like you're a machine that's quote malfunctioning, and they're gonna fix it. And it's always important to bear in mind that this mindset is based on conformity. It's trying to help you conform to mainstream society because it is perceived that will procure you more access to resources. It will offer you more acceptance from people in that society, and so on and so forth. Some amount of conformity may be necessary to keep you safe, keep you fed and clothed and housed, but internalizing the notion that you are broken and need fixing is internalizing a value judgment. And I think it's a value judgment that can often be self-harmful, because it's sort of being a little authoritarian with yourself. It's telling yourself you can never, you have to control your behavior, which is yet another control thing. The fact of the matter is, trauma is freaking messy. Healing is freaking messy. And trying to control it and constrain it is going to, I think, lose some of its effectiveness. And I think we can be something very different. I don't think that I personally believe that you do not have to be a licensed therapist to help people. There are a disproportionate amount of marginalized people in the fandom, and this enables us to know more about, mainstream society and why it kind of sucks. And we have the ability to be more to embrace diversity more, and have more closer connection with each other, because we value genuineness as a community. It's why we all have our characters that are personas that are expressions of each other. The most helpful thing you can do for someone actually often isn't fixing their problems or telling them, approaching them with that therapist mindset of, oh, I can fix this. It's often listening to them, being present with their emotions, not shying away from them, and accepting someone in their most vulnerable moments. That can really make a difference. I know for me, those were what really helped me. People who were willing to be there, even when I was really, really not doing well. Um, and one model I think to do this, if people like sort of structure to this, is something that I've encountered in some self-help resources called co-counseling. It is more accessible than therapy because it's free. And I think it can be more effective with the right people and the right and sort of the right mindset. The core concept of it is called splitting time. It's a model to ensure everyone feels like they get time to feel heard. You take any block of time that you have to co-counsel with each other, and you split it in half. For one half, one person is in the driver's seat. They can talk about whatever they want and express whatever they want. They can even just sit there and cry. You know, they can do whatever feels right for them to do. They are free to use the time doing whatever they want. The other person is just there to listen and stay present and accept the other whatever the other person wants to do, as long as it isn't harmful to themselves or others, and trying their best not to change the subject or make things about themselves. Basically, trying to reflectively listen and be there. Halfway through, those roles reverse. And some skills to help this be more effective are reflective listening, validating others' feelings. For example, rather than saying, "Oh, you should do this to fix the problem," you can say, like if someone just shared with you something very painful, you like reflect that back at them. Say, "It sounds like that was really painful to experience." Oddly, or maybe not so oddly, that is often the most effective way to validate and to help someone feel validated and accommodated when they're not feeling good. Trying to fix the problem, sometimes they're not ready to fix the problem. Sometimes they need to feel the feeling before they can move on. Inviting honest feedback about your own actions. For example, "I want to hear how you honestly feel about my actions, even if it's uncomfortable to talk about." This can be a helpful thing to say to someone who might otherwise feel less inclined to share with you how they really feel, and it sort of invites them to talk about how they feel and start that dialogue. And on the flip side, when you have to express difficult feelings, use wording that is honest, that it involves your interpretation of what happened. For example, when you didn't put your dishes in the dishwasher at the party I was hosting yesterday, I felt disrespected. I imagined that you didn't really appreciate the effort I put into hosting and didn't care if your actions created more work for me. And that sort of imagined is transparent both for you and for them. It's sort of being honest with yourself that you're having a trauma response. You're interpreting an action that may not have actually had, like, that's not necessarily what that means. It could have just been like they're ADHD and they forgot, or they're not good at that, or anything else. And this lets you make your feelings known while also not being accusatory. Again, avoiding sounding accusatory. Another sort of related concept, expressing anger or annoyance when they are at low manageable levels, which is always the best time to express anger and annoyance, is when it is not when it has not festered for a while into something scary. And again, transparency is key, I think, here. I wanted to say that what you did annoyed me, but it was only around a 2 out of 10 on the annoyance scale, just to let you know. I wanted to let you know proactively because I'm trying to be honest with others about anger, proactively. So like using that 2 out of 10 scale or some similar wording just to be honest with somebody, because sometimes people can assume that you won't let them know if you've angered them unless it's a 10 out of 10. So doing it early when everybody's still regulated and fine is often will often result in a better result. When someone is expressing negative feelings to you, listen and be there for them instead of fixing things. This sort of is related to the reflective listening thing. Giving advice and like cheer up messages actually can be really invalidating. And it's not intended to be, but just keep in mind that it can be really invalidating. It's telling someone, you shouldn't feel bad right now. You should cheer up, or you should fix this in this way right now. The better way, again, is to reflectively listen, and to validate where someone is, and just be with them and try to empower them to, fix the problem that way. Here's a big one. This is one that I am kind of, that I'll be honest, I have a little bit of a chip on my shoulder about this one, because I've had some traumatic experiences about enforcing boundaries and being retaliated against. But doing your best to be curious about and respectful of others' boundaries, rather than viewing them as obstacles to connection or something else that you want from someone else. And it gets much, much easier to do this if you don't have any egregiously unmet needs yourself. Again, desperation, or a strong desire to meet a certain need will often motivate you more to push someone's boundaries, and you're more motivated to get water out of an oasis when you're in a desert. But we're dealing with other people, not oases. An oasis, you can just take as much water as you want. A person, you can't just take whatever you want from them. Boundaries, remember that boundaries are an integral part of what makes a person who they are. So disrespecting someone's boundaries is the same as disrespecting them. And at the same way, and up the same lane, trying to push someone's boundaries is also pushing them. When dealing with people who struggle to say no, checking in on them often if you can is a huge help. I know I really appreciate people who often check in on me, because I'm still working on this. Adopt a model where enthusiastic consent is the only consent that matters. Someone sort of giving you a non-committal okay is, means that they're kind of conceding. Whereas enthusiastic consent means that they want it too, and this is a mutually beneficial thing. Yeah, I think this is important. So finally, I want to go over some resources and references, things that worked for me. The biggest one is this one, Getting Real by Dr. Susan Campbell. A lot of what I said comes straight out of this. It's an excellent practical resource, both in terms of getting more in touch with your own feelings and strategies to express them with other people, to other people in ways that are most likely to yield the results that you probably want out of this whole exercise. The Joyous Recovery by Lundy Bancroft is the framework for my co-counseling concept that I mentioned, co-counseling and splitting time. There's this thing called the Peak Living Network that he advocates for in the book, which is basically a huge, well, the book itself is basically a guideline for how to do this, how to co-counsel, how to be there for each other, and do that. Let It Be Easy by Susan Moore, just another book that I felt was very helpful to me when I read it. I'd have a random thing on YouTube, like Heidi Priebe. There's a lot of resources on YouTube. Honestly, they are very hit or miss. Don't expect every single one of them to be good. YouTube is where I've seen, if you remember me mentioning if you don't have a tidy house, you are devaluing yourself. That came from a YouTube video. It'll always be hit or miss, but if you're willing to look around, there's a lot of different people with different perspectives on there. Some of them are very queer accepting, and are, I think it's a good way to shop, without committing money to therapists, and find different ideas and seeing what works for you. Because I think that's an important exercise. One thing that I wanted to say in this presentation that I forgot to say, so I'll say it now, is I've given some advice in this presentation, but I want to be clear that this advice is not intended in the invalidating way of oh, this is how you do this. I consider this whole thing, if you're here watching this panel, I consider, the way I consider the situation is this: you are interested in being more authentic. And I am actively working on that right now too. And I have found tools that have worked for me. And I am, in this metaphor, basically opening up my toolbox and being like, hey, these are the tools that worked for me. They may not be the tools that work for you. And that's okay. That doesn't mean you're broken. It doesn't mean that you're wrong. It means that they're the tools that worked for me, so they're the ones that I know about. And at least, hopefully some of them help you. But if not, then like at least it motivates you to look for your own tools. And my point is never to invalidate you if they're not the right tools for you. And I don't take any offense if this is not the right, if some of the ways I said some of the things in the speech are not the right thing for you. Anyway, that's it. That is the presentation. I am now going to take a few questions, but I think I'm going to stop the recording here. And thank you so much for watching. I hope to do more talks like this, actually. I really like doing talks like this. If you did like this, we often talk about similar subjects on my Twitch stream, which is twitch.tv/Lokiri. I feel a little weird self-promoting after all that, but just, if this is something you like, then we do it a reasonable amount of time. So yeah, thanks for watching, and see you next time.